The early morning mist hung low over Windsor Castle as Queen Camilla stepped out of her black Bentley. She wore her finest navy blue coat, adorned with the diamond brooch that once belonged to Queen Elizabeth. Today was different from her usual royal duties. Today, she had decided to personally inspect the Queen's Guard during their morning ceremony. Captain James Morrison had been leading the Queen's Guard for 12 years. He was a decorated soldier who had served in Afghanistan and earned the respect of every man under his command. His regiment was known for their unwavering discipline and perfect execution of royal protocols. They had served the late Queen Elizabeth with absolute devotion, and now they served King Charles with the same dedication. As Queen Camilla approached the parade ground, her personal aide whispered the schedule into her ear. The guard was in the middle of their daily drill, their red uniforms pristine and their tall black bearskin hats perfectly aligned. The sound of their boots hitting the cobblestones echoed through the courtyard in perfect synchronization. What Queen Camilla didn't know is that Captain Morrison and his men had been discussing recent changes in the royal household. Many of the guards had served the royal family for decades. They had watched Prince Charles grow up, seen him through his divorce, and witnessed his long relationship with Camilla. While they respected the chain of command, their loyalty ran deepest to the crown itself and the traditions they had sworn to protect. Queen Camilla had been making subtle changes since becoming queen consort. She had requested modifications to certain ceremonies, asked for different protocols during state dinners, and had begun suggesting alterations to long-standing traditions. Some courtiers whispered that she was trying to put her own mark on the monarchy, but others defended her right to contribute to the institution she had joined. The morning sun broke through the clouds as Queen Camilla positioned herself at the edge of the parade ground. She had brought along her private secretary and 2 photographers to document what she intended to be a routine royal engagement. However, she had something specific in mind that would demonstrate her authority and position within the royal hierarchy. Captain Morrison noticed the royal entourage approaching and continued. With the drill as planned, his men moved with the precision that had made the Queen's Guard famous worldwide. Tourists often gathered to watch these ceremonies, but having the Queen Consort present added a level of formality that required careful attention to protocol. The guards had heard rumors that Queen Camilla had been expressing frustration about certain aspects of royal ceremony. Some said she felt that protocols established during Queen Elizabeth's reign needed updating to reflect the new monarchy under King Charles. Others suggested she was simply trying to understand her role better and ensure she received the proper respect due to her position. As the morning ceremony continued, Queen Camilla observed the guards with keen interest. She watched how they moved, how they responded to commands, and how they maintained their composure under the scrutiny of royal observation. The guards, in turn, were acutely aware of her presence and the potential significance of this unexpected inspection. The stage was being set for a confrontation that none of them could have predicted. Queen Camilla had come with specific expectations about how she should be received and honored by the Queen's Guard. Captain Morrison and his men were prepared to follow proper protocol, but they were also guardians of traditions that had been passed down through generations of service to the British Crown. As the morning drill concluded, Queen Camilla stepped forward with an air of authority that surprised everyone present. Her private secretary scrambled to keep up as she approached Captain Morrison, who stood at attention with his sword drawn in the traditional position of readiness. "Captain Morrison," she began, her voice carrying across the courtyard, "I have come to observe the loyalty and respect that the Queen's Guard shows to the royal family." Her words were carefully chosen, and there was an undertone that suggested this was more than a casual visit. Captain Morrison saluted respectfully, as protocol demanded when addressing any member of the royal family. "Your Majesty," he responded, "the Queen's Guard stands ready to serve the crown with honor and dedication as we have for centuries." But Queen Camilla had something else in mind. She had been studying royal protocols and believed that as Queen Consort, she deserved the same ceremonial honors that had been given to Queen Elizabeth. In her interpretation of royal hierarchy, she should receive the full military honors traditionally reserved for the sovereign. "Captain," she announced loudly enough for all the guards to hear, "I want your men to perform the royal salute in my honor. The full ceremonial salute as was done for Queen Elizabeth." Her demand hung in the air like a challenge. and the courtyard fell silent, except for the distant sounds of London traffic beyond the castle walls. Captain Morrison felt his heart skip a beat. The royal salute was a sacred ceremony reserved for the reigning monarch. It was a tradition that went back hundreds of years and was considered one of the most solemn honors in military protocol. Even senior members of the royal family, including princes and princesses, did not receive this level of ceremonial recognition unless specifically ordered by the sovereign. The guards behind Captain Morrison remained perfectly still, but their trained ears caught every word of the exchange. Sergeant Williams, who had served under 3 different monarchs during his 30-year career, felt a knot form in his stomach. Lance Corporal Davies, barely 22 years old, looked toward his commanding officer for guidance, unsure of what was happening but sensing the tension in the air. "Your Majesty," Captain Morrison replied carefully. "The royal salute is a ceremony specifically reserved for His Majesty the King, as the sovereign. While we hold the utmost respect for your position as Queen Consort, protocol dictates that we follow established military traditions regarding ceremonial honors." Queen Camilla's expression hardened. She had expected immediate compliance with her request, and the captain's response felt like a public challenge to her authority. Her private secretary shifted nervously, recognizing that this situation was escalating beyond what anyone had anticipated for a routine morning visit. "Captain Morrison," she said, her voice rising slightly, "I am the Queen Consort of this realm. I stand beside His Majesty as a representative of the Crown. When I request a ceremonial honor from the Queen's Guard, I expect that request to be fulfilled without debate or hesitation." The photographer who had come to document what was supposed to be a pleasant royal engagement found himself in an awkward position. Should he continue taking pictures of what was clearly becoming a tense confrontation? Or should he lower his camera and pretend this wasn't happening? Captain Morrison maintained his military bearing, while his mind raced through the implications of the situation. He could not authorize a royal salute without direct orders from King Charles himself. To do so would violate his oath and potentially create a constitutional crisis. Yet refusing a direct request from the Queen Consort could also have serious consequences for his career and the reputation of his regiment. The guards watched their captain carefully, knowing that whatever happened next would be a moment they would remember for the rest of their lives. They had sworn an oath to protect the crown and uphold the traditions of their regiment, but they also understood the delicate politics of royal hierarchy and the potential consequences of any decision made in the next few minutes. Captain Morrison found himself caught between his duty to respect the royal family and his obligation to uphold military traditions that had been sacred for centuries. The weight of his decision would affect not only his own career, but also the integrity of the Queen's Guard and the trust placed in them by the British people. He remembered his grandfather, who had served in the same regiment during World War II, telling him stories about the importance of military protocol. "Son," his grandfather had said, "when you wear that uniform, you represent something bigger than yourself. You represent honor, tradition, and the unbreakable bond between the military and the crown." Queen Camilla stood waiting for his response, her photographers ready to capture what she expected would be a moment of triumph and recognition. She had spent months preparing for this day, consulting with various courtiers about royal protocol and her rightful place within the monarchy's ceremonial structure. "Your Majesty," Captain Morrison began slowly, choosing his words with extreme care, "I have the deepest respect for your position and your service to the realm. However, military regulations and centuries of tradition require that the royal salute be authorized only by His Majesty the King himself. I cannot in good conscience order my men to perform this ceremony without explicit royal command from the sovereign." The Queen Consort's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. She had not expected resistance to what she considered a reasonable request for recognition of her status. Several castle staff members who had gathered to watch the morning ceremony exchanged worried glances, sensing that this confrontation was spiraling beyond anyone's control. "Captain," she said, her voice now sharp with authority, "are you refusing a direct order from the Queen Consort? Are you suggesting that I do not have the standing to request appropriate honors from the military forces that serve this monarchy?" Behind Captain Morrison, his men remained perfectly still, but their loyalty was being tested in ways they had never imagined. Sergeant Williams had served through multiple royal transitions and understood the delicate balance between respecting individual members of the royal family and maintaining the sacred protocols that governed their service. Private Thompson, only 19 years old and new to the guard, whispered quietly to the soldier beside him, "What happens if we refuse? What happens if we obey?" His question reflected the confusion that many of the younger guards felt as they watched their commanding officer navigate this unprecedented situation. Captain Morrison realized that whatever decision he made would become part of royal history. If he ordered the royal salute without proper authorization, he would be violating his oath and potentially setting a dangerous precedent that could undermine the constitutional foundations of the monarchy. If he refused, he might be seen as disrespecting the queen consort and could face severe consequences. "Your Majesty," he said, maintaining his respectful tone despite the growing tension, "I serve the crown with absolute dedication. My oath is to protect and honor the monarchy according to the laws and traditions that have guided this institution for generations. I cannot authorize a royal salute without following proper channels, but I would be honored to arrange for you to receive all appropriate honors that protocol allows." Queen Camilla felt the eyes of everyone in the courtyard watching her response. She had come expecting respect and recognition, but instead found herself in a public confrontation that was being witnessed by guards, staff members, and photographers. The morning sun seemed brighter now, casting harsh shadows that made every expression and gesture more dramatic. Her private secretary approached cautiously and whispered something in her ear, probably suggesting that they could resolve this matter privately through proper channels. But Queen Camilla had already committed herself to this course of action, and backing down now would feel like a public defeat that she was not prepared to accept. The standoff continued as both sides held their ground, each believing they were upholding important principles, while the entire foundation of royal protocol hung in the balance of this unexpected morning confrontation. As the tension reached its peak, something unexpected began to happen among the ranks of the Queen's Guard. Without any verbal communication or obvious signal, the guards began to demonstrate their solidarity with their captain through a display of military precision that spoke louder than words. Sergeant Williams, drawing on his decades of experience, took a nearly imperceptible step forward. This small movement was immediately noticed by the other guards, who understood its significance. In military tradition, this subtle gesture indicated support for their commanding officer and adherence to proper protocol. One by one, the other guards followed suit, each taking the same measured step forward. Their movement was so synchronized and professional that it appeared to be part of a planned ceremony, but Queen Camilla and her staff quickly realized that this was actually a form of respectful defiance. Private Thompson, despite his youth and inexperience, felt a surge of pride as he participated in this silent demonstration. He had joined the Queen's Guard because he believed in honor, duty, and tradition. Now he was witnessing these principles being tested in real time, and his fellow guardsmen were showing him what it meant to stand together for what they believed was right. Queen Camilla watched this display with growing alarm. She could see that the guards were not being disrespectful or insubordinate in any obvious way, but their coordinated movement sent a clear message that they supported their captain's decision to follow proper protocol rather than comply with her demand. "What is the meaning of this?" she asked, her voice betraying both anger and confusion. "Captain Morrison, explain your men's behavior immediately." Captain Morrison looked back at his guards and felt a wave of emotion that he struggled to keep hidden. These men trusted him to lead them correctly, and they were demonstrating their faith in his judgment even though they knew it might have consequences for their own careers. "Your Majesty," he replied, "my men are simply maintaining their positions according to standard military bearing. They understand the importance of following proper protocol and supporting the chain of command that has served the monarchy faithfully for generations." But the guard's silent protest was not finished. Lance Corporal Davies, remembering stories his father had told him about serving under Queen Elizabeth, slowly and deliberately adjusted his grip on his rifle, moving it to the position known as present arms, a gesture of respect, but notably not the full royal salute that Queen Camilla had demanded. The other guards immediately followed his example, creating a sea of precisely positioned rifles that honored the Queen Consort while staying within the bounds of what military protocol allowed. Their message was clear. They would show respect, but they would not violate sacred traditions. Queen Camilla's photographer, recognizing that this was not the triumphant moment that had been anticipated, began to lower his camera. The images he had captured so far told a story of confrontation and resistance rather than the royal recognition ceremony that had been planned. The queen consort realized that she was witnessing something unprecedented in her experience with the royal household. The guards were not openly defying her, but they were making it clear that their loyalty was to the institution of the monarchy rather than to any individual, members' personal demands. Tourists and castle staff who had gathered to watch what they thought would be a routine ceremonial event found themselves witnessing a moment of constitutional drama that none of them fully understood but all of them sensed was historically significant. Captain Morrison, Queen Camilla said, her voice now trembling slightly with frustration, I want you to understand that there will be consequences for this display of insubordination. I will be speaking directly with His Majesty about your conduct and that of your men. The captain maintained his professional composure, even though he knew that his career and the future of many of his men might depend on how King Charles interpreted the morning's events. The guards continued to hold their respectful but defiant position, creating a tableau that would be remembered as a defining moment in the relationship between the new queen consort and the military forces that served the crown. As word of the confrontation began to spread beyond the immediate area, Queen Camilla found herself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. Castle staff members were whispering among themselves, and she could see some of them pulling out their phones, undoubtedly to share news of the unprecedented standoff with their colleagues. A senior equerry who had served the royal family for over 20 years approached the scene, having been alerted by concerned staff members. Sir Richard Pemberton had witnessed many delicate situations during his career, but nothing quite like this public disagreement between the queen consort and the queen's guard. Your Majesty, Sir Richard said quietly as he reached Queen Camilla's side, perhaps this matter might be better resolved through proper diplomatic channels. His Majesty is currently in meetings, but I could arrange for this protocol question to be addressed through the appropriate offices. Queen Camilla realized that she was being offered a face-saving exit from a situation that had spiraled far beyond her control. However, accepting this suggestion would mean admitting that her original demand had been inappropriate, something she was reluctant to do in front of so many witnesses. The guards continued their silent demonstration, maintaining their respectful but firm position, while tourists began gathering at the edges of the courtyard. Some visitors were taking pictures and videos with their phones, capturing images that would soon spread across social media and news outlets around the world. Captain Morrison could see that the situation was becoming a public spectacle, which served no one's interests. The Queen's Guard had made their point about protecting military protocol, but prolonging the confrontation would only cause further embarrassment for the royal family and potentially damage the monarchy's reputation. Your Majesty, he said, I respectfully suggest that we could arrange a proper ceremonial review at your convenience, following all appropriate protocols and with His Majesty's authorization. The Queen's Guard would be honored to participate in any official ceremony that has been properly arranged through royal channels. Queen Camilla felt trapped between her pride and the growing realization that she had misunderstood both her own authority and the sacred nature of military traditions. The tourists were getting closer, and she could hear their excited conversations about witnessing what appeared to be a royal drama unfolding before their eyes. Her private secretary approached with obvious urgency. Ma'am, she whispered, we should consider returning to your scheduled appointments. This situation appears to be attracting unwanted attention, and it might be best to address any protocol concerns through private channels. The queen consort looked around the courtyard and saw the faces watching her every move. The guards remained perfectly disciplined, but their silent solidarity had effectively defeated her attempt to assert authority beyond what tradition allowed. She had come seeking recognition and respect, but instead had created a situation that highlighted the limits of her position within the royal hierarchy. Captain Morrison, she said finally, her voice stiff with barely controlled anger, you have made your position clear. I trust that you understand the significance of your actions today and their potential consequences. With as much dignity as she could muster, Queen Camilla turned to leave the courtyard. Her entourage quickly formed around her, trying to create a barrier between her and the curious tourists who were still taking pictures and asking questions about what had happened. As she walked toward her waiting car, Queen Camilla could hear the synchronized sound of the guards returning to their normal positions. Their movement was precise and professional, but to her it sounded like a final statement of their victory in this unexpected battle over protocol and tradition. The morning sun that had seemed so promising when she arrived now felt harsh and unforgiving, as she retreated from what should have been a routine royal engagement but had instead become one of the most humiliating experiences of her life as queen consort. Within hours of Queen Camilla's departure from Windsor Castle, news of the confrontation began spreading through both official and unofficial channels. Social media was buzzing with videos and photos taken by tourists who had witnessed the unprecedented standoff between the Queen consort and the Queen's Guard King. Charles received word of the incident while attending a meeting with Commonwealth representatives. His private secretary delivered the news discreetly, but the king's facial expression revealed his shock and concern about the potential implications for the monarchy's reputation. He immediately requested a full briefing on what had occurred and asked for Captain Morrison to provide a detailed written report. Meanwhile, Captain Morrison faced the difficult task of explaining the morning's events to his superior officers. Colonel James Hartwell, who oversaw the household division, listened with growing amazement as the captain described Queen Camilla's demand for a royal salute and the guards' response to the situation. "Captain," Colonel Hartwell said after hearing the full account, "you are absolutely correct to uphold military protocol. The royal salute cannot be authorized by anyone except His Majesty himself.
However, I suspect this matter is far from resolved,
and we must be prepared for potential repercussions." The guards who had participated in the silent demonstration found themselves dealing with a mixture of pride and anxiety. They had stood up for their traditions and supported their commanding officer, but they also understood that challenging any member of the royal family, even respectfully, could have serious consequences for their careers. Sergeant Williams gathered the younger guards together that afternoon to discuss the morning's events. "You all conducted yourselves with honor today," he told them. "Sometimes standing up for what's right requires courage, and you showed that courage while maintaining the discipline and respect that defines the Queen's Guard." Queen Camilla, meanwhile, spent the rest of the day in meetings with her advisors, trying to determine how to handle the fallout from what was already being called her protocol crisis in palace circles. Her private secretary had fielded dozens of calls from journalists seeking comment on the morning's events, and royal correspondents were beginning to analyze the constitutional implications of the confrontation. Late that evening, King Charles personally called Captain Morrison to discuss the incident. The conversation was private, but those who knew the king well suggested that he supported the captain's adherence to proper protocol while expressing regret that the situation had escalated into a public confrontation. Morrison, the king reportedly said, "The Queen's Guard has served the crown with distinction for centuries because of your commitment to duty and tradition. Today you upheld those principles under difficult circumstances, and I want you to know that your actions were appropriate and necessary." Story continued to generate international attention as constitutional experts debated the incident's significance for understanding royal hierarchy and military protocol. Some commentators praised the guards for protecting institutional traditions, while others criticized them for publicly embarrassing the queen consort. Within palace circles, the incident became a cautionary tale about the importance of understanding royal protocol before making public demands. Queen Camilla's advisors quietly recommended that future ceremonial requests be carefully reviewed through proper channels to avoid similar confrontations. For the Queen's Guard, the morning's event strengthened their bond as a unit and reinforced their commitment to the principles that had guided their service for generations. They had faced an unprecedented challenge to their traditions and had responded with the same discipline and honor that had made them symbols of British military excellence. Captain Morrison continued to lead his men with the quiet confidence of someone who had stood up for his principles when it mattered most. The guards returned to their daily duties with renewed pride in their role as protectors of both the royal family and the constitutional traditions that formed the foundation of the British monarchy. The morning that began as a routine ceremonial visit had become a defining moment that would be remembered as the day the Queen's Guard chose, tradition over convenience, protocol over politics, and duty over personal comfort, leaving Queen Camilla to learn the hard way that respect must be earned within the boundaries of constitutional law and military tradition.